Growing up as a kid, I never really enjoyed the racetrack style of racing games where cornering and precision mattered. Now, my brother loved racing games, but more so loved the Need for Speed Underground style of games, or the 2005 racing game Juiced. Yeah, remember that?
No.
So when the original Forza games released, they weren't really my jam, even through the Xbox 360 days and into the Xbox One. I preferred doing stupid things on the streets or racing illegally, in a video game, that is. But when I fell in love with Formula 1 about 5 years ago, I started to appreciate track racing, and it shifted something in me. And if you've been around on my channel for the past 3 years or so, you know that I'm a bit of a racing fan. Now, I'm not a racing nut, but I'll give anything a general shot, really.
Yeah, I'll give it a shot. I mean, it's my job, right?
After my experience with the latest Forza Horizon game, I kinda gave up with the franchise, and if you've seen that review, then well, you may know why. So imagine my surprise when I booted up Forza Motorsport, the latest release in the Forza family of games that returns to the racetrack with pit stops, penalties for crashes, different classes of vehicles to race, and actual working support for my steering wheel and cockpit. Well, I was very surprised. But is Forza Motorsport's Xbox's answer to the ever-popular Grand Turismo series and PC's iRacing?
Yes, I would, Kent.
Developed by Turn 10 Studios, the developers behind Forza Horizon 4 and 5, Forza Motorsport goes back to its racing roots, taking the racing off the streets and back to the track where it belongs. With super impressive visuals, fantastic audio design, and more cars to choose from than Jay Leno's garage, Forza Motorsport feels fantastic behind a steering wheel. Now, it's worth noting, I reviewed this on PC using my Trustmaster TSXW steering wheel setup with the Trustmaster shifter. It's worth noting, I did not use it with a controller, nor did I use my Ferrari SF1000 wheel. I used the Trustmaster TSXW Sparco standard wheel and the Trustmaster shifter, and that's it. Well, it was also in my next level cockpit, but it's a cockpit. But either way, that's the setup that I used for playing this game. And I wanted to give this review a different approach by simply answering the question, can you turn this game on, plug in your steering wheel, and go for a race without any complications? Unlike the complications I had with Forza Horizon. And 100%, yes, you can. Now, we've not had a classic racetrack Forza game since 2017's Forza Motorsport 7, and this latest entry is simply titled Forza Motorsports, which seems like recent games are being taken back to basics and acting as a soft reboot. I mean, look at Mortal Kombat 1 and Assassin's Creed Mirage, for example. Anyway, back to Forza Motorsports. The title starts off similar to, say, that of the Horizon games, where you're dropped straight into the driver's seat and the game teaches you the basics of driving before dropping you into another car that handles differently, as well as dropping you into, say, the pit lanes and showing you how cars handle differently and how the pit lanes are basically required for most races. But what is Forza Motorsports? Well, it's sort of the greatest hit style of racing game that incorporates classic cars, whether it's American or European. Modern hot hatchbacks, modern muscle cars, GT3s. There's even the option to race modern electric hypercars, which, yeah, not hearing a car rev or change gears kinda broke me, and there's plenty of other cars on top of that. Forza Motorsport is basically Gran Turismo or iRacing for the Xbox, and I gotta say, while it doesn't have the options or monthly service fee of iRacing,
I bad want money now. Me sick.
Ooh, he card reads good.
Forza Motorsport is overall a pretty damn good jack-of-all-trades racing game. If you're unsure though whether Forza Motorsport is something you might enjoy, well, thankfully it can be played multiple ways with multiple different difficulty multipliers, if that makes sense.
Really?
Yes, really.
For starters, you can control the realism of tyre degradation, fuel consumption, as well as damage and suspension. If you want to race and have a bit more fun and not care about the damage, then you can adjust or turn off those settings. On top of this, you can change how fast other drivers compete against you, as well as your own driver settings such as transmission settings and ABS and traction control. So you can really drive Forza your way, and you can start any way you want, or you can start with all the assists turned on and then slowly turn them off to find the way that you want to play. Now, depending on the difficulty of the drivers, as well as say the tyre degradation and damage settings, that will give you higher rewards for winning. So say if you have realistic damage and fuel management and tyre wearing with higher difficulty of drivers than easy, your rewards for coming first will be paying a lot more than just playing on easy mode, which means you can buy more cars and more upgrades. Hell, if you put realistic damage on, you'll also need to manage the wear and tear on your transmission and engine. Now, I decided to give this a shot for my first couple of races, and seeing as I'm used to paddle shifters on a F1 car with no clutch, my first couple of races I did some serious damage to my engine, where I struggled to get out of third gear and I came plumb last.
Really?
Speaking of which, the cars available here range from classic muscle cars, the beloved 1988 McLaren F1, GT3s, basically nearly everything you can think of. And if you know me, you know I am a massive Formula 1 fan, and Forza Motorsport had me enjoy other aspects of, well, motorsport. Shit, I even played some NASCAR in this, and I really enjoyed myself.
I'm Ricky Bobby. If you don't chew Big Red, then you.
Now, if any racing game has the Aston Martin DB5, it is without a doubt one of the first cars I'll get, but unlike the Horizon game before it, I'm not immediately allowed to ruin the car by changing the engine or making a deceptive hypercar with a Aston Martin shell over the top. And while there is car customization, which I'll get to in a moment, Forza allows you to properly race cars and appreciate them for what they are before modifying it.
Well, there wasn't room for it. Nah, actually, that is now my upstairs sitting room.
Is it?
Yes.
When starting the game, you'll pick a car that will decide what racing style or series that you'll first move into. Now, you can either choose a Subaru, a Ford Mustang, or a Honda Civic. I decided to go with the Subaru as a general overall starter car, which, as I mentioned, I broke the engine a few times.
Guys, I've got a warning light on the dashboard. It says stop.
And this starter championship or series will teach you how to race and how the pit lane is sort of needed and how you need to upgrade your car after races. Now, your drivers will have a driver profile with a driver level rating, but each car starts at level 1, and the more you race that particular car and you get used to driving that car, the more you level up that car, which then works into the upgrade system. Now, you'll have the standard of changing the tyres or the fuel injection or the weight distribution, basically all the standards that you'd have for upgrading your car in a motorsport game, but rather than a streets or a festival game where the upgrades are something stupid, here they're a little bit more sensible. But the more you drive a car, the more you level it up, which is how you unlock upgrades for the car. Now, they still cost credits, and you still in some instances need to keep your car within a ratings classification for the series you're racing in. So you can't say start a classic car racing series, then upgrade your car so much that it just smokes the competition. But the more you drive, the more you unlock the option to add upgrades to your car. You can add upgrades manually to your car just by picking and choosing the parts you want, or you can let the game apply the relevant upgrades for you if you're not a massive upgrade or car nut kind of guy, which is a welcomed option for newer players of the series. Now, in one of the racing series, I used a modern Mini that would hold its speed when it was in the corners, and I felt that if I put upgrades into top speed, I'd lose the time in the corners. So I worked on more handling and better acceleration, and by the time I was done, I was running rings around Volkswagen Golfs, no problem, at least depending on the track. But Forza Motorsport isn't a game where the fastest car wins. Well, it sorta is. But what's the best strategy if it's a longer race? When do you pit? If you're playing with realistic damage and you hit something and you need to pit for repairs for the damage too, when do you do that? How do you handle corners and apply pressure to the drivers in front? And Forza Motorsport penalises you for cheating in races. If you go off the track and gain an advantage, or you hit a car too hard or deliberately, you will get penalised, and where crashing and acting like a dick is kinda necessary to survive online races in the Horizon series.
I've been hit.
But how do the cars handle duty? Well, as I mentioned, my time with Forza Motorsport was using a Trustmaster TSXW setup and the Trustmaster shifter, and I can honestly say this Forza kicks the crap out of Horizon with its responsiveness, its feel, and its overall fun factor. Previous Forza games, or even Grid, I found cars wouldn't grip, or the slightest touch of the steering wheel would have me spinning out in the wrong direction. Where here, it felt fun right out of the box. Classic cars, while slow to speed up and sort of cornering as well, had a sense of power and elegance to them. The feel of getting a gear change right when you're driving a DB5 down the straight, or holding 4th gear around a corner in the 1965 Mini, was super impressive. And when it came to driving modern race cars, it felt fast and beefy, but I could physically see my tyre life going down and down as I pushed myself around the track. Now, there are some areas where I wouldn't say I was let down, but more so a bit of a, oh, that's kinda weird with Forza Motorsport. Now, as the game is a track racer rather than a street racer, we're given the option to choose our driver's body type and race suit with a matching helmet, and while it is a core mechanic, sure, it would have been great if we could create the suit and helmets ourselves, a bit like we can in the F1 games. We also don't have the option to give ourselves a driver number, which I thought was a bit weird. Now, sure, just like in the Horizon games or previous Forza games before, you can create liveries for your car, so there is no doubt without an option some fantastic liveries from fans of the series that they're going to make, so you can probably add your own name and driver to the car that way. But it would have been cool when racing that you see your name or your gamer tag appear alongside your driver number, and if you were say driving more street legal cars than the GT3s or old school F1s, that you'd have your driver number drawn on the rear windows or something. Again, it's not really a negative, but it's more of a nitpick or something that I just would have liked. Now, I also would have liked to see have a bit of a iRacing start to a practice session, where we're sitting in our cars in the garage or on the pit lane, and we have to start and fire the ignition for the car. Where here in Forza Motorsport, our driver walks to the car, it leaves the pit lane and already does like half a lap into this little intro cutscene before we're behind the wheel. And I think having us start the car ourselves and do a warm-up lap to get the tyres hot would have been a better option. Now, when playing on more simulated settings, you can flip through on-screen displays which can show you your tyre degradation, your braking and accelerating lines, as well as your engine wear or transmission wear, which is where I could see that I completely screwed my engine when I first started racing.
What manner of terrible thing has happened under my bonnet?
But when I was playing on full simulated damage and I hit a wall at over 100 kilometers an hour, I saw the tyres on the tyre wall move, and yeah, that impressed me. But it didn't see sort of much damage to my car. Now, I did have major bodywork damage and suspension damage according to the mini status bar at the bottom corner of the screen, but the physical look of my car looked like it'd been in a minor fender bender, where I was kind of expecting for, when you're driving in iRacing, you can completely total and flip your car. But at least when driving after a decent impact, your steering and braking is completely screwed, and you need to go into the pits where they can repair the damage, and that's kinda cool. Now, there are loads of options when it comes to cars in the game, and the same can be said with the tracks, but I was a little bit let down when I saw old school F1s in the game, yet there were no new F1 cars. And I would love to see how Turn 10 handle modern Formula 1 cars in one of their games, as I think they would kinda nail it in some aspects. But when it comes to tracks, being a F1 fan, there were some tracks that I recognised, like Silverstone, Spa and Suzuka. But what had me surprised the most was the Nürburgring, in that you can only race around the racing track element and not the full Nürburgring. And I remember being able to do this in previous Forza Motorsports games too, and I would have loved to race something like, say, the Rimac around the full Nürburgring, but who's to say we won't get that track added to the game with future updates. But did I enjoy Forza Motorsport overall? The answer is a solid yes. With previous racing games I've reviewed outside of the F1 games, I've been a bit dissatisfied, and in Horizon's case, very disappointed, at least in my perspective. But Forza Motorsport has us return back to the tracks, and as soon as I sat in my racing seat ready to go, it had me grinning ear to ear. Hell, there were even moments where Mrs. Dudi heard me speak to myself while driving, telling myself what gear I needed to change down into, and F1 games never had me do that. If you're unsure whether you'll like Forza Motorsport, thankfully it is on Xbox Game Pass, which as I've said is a fantastic service. And there's still Forza Horizon for those of you who prefer racing on the streets and having more of a arcade fun game rather than a more serious style of racing game. But with its variety of different ways to play, Forza Motorsport is a game that welcomes the beginners into the series, but also gives veteran racers something that they'll need to learn. So whether you've just started playing racing games or you've done the virtual 24 hours of Le Mans in iRacing, always remember to play with each other and play with yourselves.